been?
Hello, Professor Eric. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm very good. Very nice to meet you, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to present ourselves. I believe and it's quite impressive for me because I see all those prestigious business schools and MBA programs. So it's really a privilege to be with you today. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir, and thank you for coming in. It's always impressive to talk to new professors and learn about how they're looking at changing the world. So I always am willing to speak to all the best deans, and it's very surprising. Sometimes we learn the most from the places we least expect. And so I am always excited to meet new professors. So thank you for coming on board. All right, sir. So it's very interesting. I was looking at your profile and I see that you are an extremely global citizen. You know, you are teaching in a phenomenal number of countries. And so I really want to, every academic has a superhero story as to how they got into academics, right? I mean,
Yeah.
was it a calling, was it a pull, or some people land up by lack of choice. And so there is this entire beautiful spectrum as to how people get into academics. So I would really love to hear your story of how did you start?
Okay, well, thank you. I have to go back to my birth. I was born in Turkey, Istanbul, because my father was working for the French government and recruiting workers for French industry in the 70s and in the 80s. So I was very privileged to live a childhood on different continents. So I grew up in Istanbul, then I relocated to France, Marseille, southern France. And then 4 years in Portugal and 1 year in Senegal, being the only white kid in a classroom of 35 students in Africa. And that was, I was from a very early age exposed to different cultures, different languages, different ethnicities, and being myself a minority in Senegal, that was I was 13 years old, and that was really mind-blowing as a human experience. And then, of course, once you stick your finger into this global world, you want to be on the move all the time. And so during my studies, I studied law in the School of Law, but at the same time, I was so curious by different fields. So I studied also economics and management in one of the most elitistic school in France, which is École Normale Supérieure, which is not ENS Saclay, Paris-Saclay. And so I did both track at the same time at the university and in that specialized school, where I got actually, I had to take a national exam to become a civil servant as in teaching economics and management. But I always loved law. I did my master in law, and I, during my studies, I went for 6 months in Leiden University, or Leiden University, which is the Oxbridge from Netherlands, where I studied international law for 1 semester. But also during those studies, I wanted to do internships abroad. So I did a 6-month internship in Brazil, where I was trying to help French producers to sell movies in Brazil. And there was a huge technological issue because the French, they really love to have their own technology. So we had to transfer all the movies in the new technology, which was the American one. And there was also the legal challenge and so on. So that was also a very interesting experience, contacting and visiting at that time different TV networks in Brazil. And then, in France, we used to do the military service, but you had an option to stay in barracks or to work for the private sector or to work as a teacher. And this is how I got into that job. I was 23 years old and I had students 20 years old, 21 years old, and I was teaching for 2 years in Ecuador. And I chose Ecuador. I was actually offered to teach in Pondicherry, India. I was offered also to teach in Madagascar for 2 years. That was part of my civil service as instead of doing the military service. And I chose Ecuador because at that time I didn't speak Spanish. So I wanted to learn a new language skill so I could speak English, German, and because I also learned German at school, and Portuguese. Portuguese was my favorite language, and so it happened that I lived there for 6 months, for 2 years in Ecuador. That was my first teaching experience, and at that time I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I ended up coming back to Europe, living for 7 years in Brussels. And during that time, I started my career teaching in Institute of Technology in northern France, commuting between countries. So it was also quite interesting because, my kids now have 4 passports. They were born in Belgium. It's always a mix of personal experience, professional experience, and this is how you become a global educator. So I did those 7 years in Brussels, and then we moved in California, where my wife has a job at Stanford University. She's still a professor in the School of Medicine at Stanford University. She's a pediatric radiologist. And at that time, well, I was taking care of the kids. And that was very good. And I started a PhD. I was visiting scholar at UC Berkeley. Working actually in law. The idea was to try to study a bit the regulation of higher education markets and how Supreme Courts in Europe and in the United States were regulating or deregulating these markets. And so it was a comparative studies. And then, life is full of wonderful surprises and sometimes not so wonderful. I had a wonderful Californian divorce. And so after 4 years, I had to relocate to France. My kids continued to grow up over there in the United States, and I had to commute. And of course, part of my motivation in this work is always to get more, to meet more people, get more experience. So I started to teach in executive MBAs, international economics, for example, in Jakarta. That was what I had to teach. And they were very curious about regional integration processes because, they have the big challenge in Indonesia to counterweight a bit the weight of China through the Asian network. And so I had to teach this. And I was also teaching change management in Russia in an executive MBA in St. Petersburg. And that was also quite challenging because I had in front of me people much older than me, like in Jakarta also, but they had older issues in trying to, I would say, have more flat organization, more agile organization, and also try to change a bit their way. So we work a lot on case studies approach. And sometimes I had, wonderful feedback, like, saying like all the things coming from United States about transparency, flat organization. We had that in the 1930s during Stalin. So that was quite amusing to see, well, okay, yes, let's try to see things a bit differently. And I thought also for 7 years in Japan, and that was also another big challenge because in Japan, often you have an interpreter. So you can't really connect directly with the students. And I was teaching about global management, and I had then to upgrade my skills and try to learn more about Japanese organizations and especially global organizations. So this is a bit my profile. So I've been also, I forgot to mention, I've been working for the last 25 years in School of Management, Faculty of Economics. And what we do in France is that we do a lot of cooperative education, meaning that we don't only teach in executive education to people who already have some experience or people that are on the job. We also teach to younger students who are actually, they have a position in the company. They have a junior position, and they come to university a couple of days per week to get some teaching. And what we do is that we actually meet their managers. And so we go in those companies, large and not so large. Sometimes they're small family-owned companies. And we try to think more about the learning objectives. We work together on their master thesis. trying to help companies or organizations to solve some complex problems. So there was the way we teach management in France, in most business schools and school of management, it's really in alliance, in cooperation with companies, with businesses.
It's a very, you have a phenomenal in-depth expertise. I think life has taken you different places, and very interestingly, you have traveled to experience these different places. I saw that you spent almost 8 years being a visiting faculty in Indonesia, and that's a significant amount of time. And so now that you are, Vice Dean of International Relationship, what is currently your role about, and what are you responsible for?
Okay, so I hold mainly two administrative positions, and I also teach a lot. So unfortunately, I had to quit research, and even if recently I had to write a chapter on global competencies, but I'm currently, as a Vice Dean of International Relations, I'm trying to, on one hand, to build partnership with different stakeholders, universities, but also companies, in order to offer international experiences to our students. And the traditional way is through exchange semester or internships abroad. But on the other hand, as the Vice Dean of International Relations and as an educator, I'm trying to bring internationalization at home, in the classroom. So what we've been developing, we've developed a lot of COIL, collaborative online international learning experience, or global virtual exchange. We've been developing hybrid programs and projects with different universities. So the idea is to also expose as many students as possible to the international challenges, and always connect the local with the global. This is, I would say, one of the most important things that I do as the Vice Dean of International Relations. So of course, it leads me to travel quite a bit. Since the COVID, we've been working also a lot online. But for example, last week I was in Colombia for 1 week, and I was teaching in Colombia about change management and ESG standards, so the environmental, social, and governance standards. Before that, I was in Chile, and before that, I was in Vietnam in December. And in Vietnam, I was talking about global competencies and gearing up towards globalization 4.0. So this is what I do as the Vice Dean of International Relations. But if we are here today, it's because I created 10 years ago the International MBA in my School of Management. And at first, we didn't have any MBA in our School of Management, because there's another School of Management in Paris, IAE Paris, that has an executive MBA, which is really good. It's linked with Sorbonne University. And we always had some questions about whether we should build one or not, because there's already so many MBAs around the world, and what would be the added value of a program. And I finally decided to open what we call an international MBA, which is not an executive MBA. And the idea is that we have a mix of junior and I would say a little bit more senior profiles coming from all around the world. It's very, very international. On a classroom of 25, we might have 2 or 3 French students. And the idea is to really I'm trying to do the same job than my father, to attract talents and to keep those talents in France. So to attract talents for French or global companies that are operating in France and in Europe. And as the co-head of the International MBA, because right now, if you really want to make an impact, you need to work in teams. So I have a team of 3 other colleagues, and we organize this International MBA. We manage this International MBA. There's one who's Japanese, and she was educated in the US, and then she did a PhD at London School of Economics. We have another American, is more like a digital marketer. He works for this international organization, the OECD. And then we have a full professor, typical French, working on resistance and change management. So a very academic profile. And so with this team, we try to have, the best, I would say to lead, because we're going to celebrate our 10th year anniversary. So it's been very nice during the last 10 years, but we're trying to bring this international MBA into the next step.
So, it's very tough to launch an MBA program from zero, right? There's a lot of resistance within institutions to do so.
Yeah.
So, I'm also very surprised that the size of the batch seems very small and personal. Yeah. So is that a choice that you have taken? Because institutions do like to scale at some point. And so how are you thinking about a batch of 25 students? Because you're at your 10th year anniversary, and I'm assuming everybody wants to build larger batches so that they can have more impact. So what are your thoughts around that?
Okay, so 25 students per year. So in total, we're around 50 students because it's a 2-year program. But sometimes we have students who go directly into the second year because of their previous experience, that they don't need to do the 2-year program. We're very privileged, very, very privileged, because we are a public institutions. So it means we're heavily subsidized by the French government. And this is why we can have such small groups. The idea of scalability for universities, it's not, for public universities, not really a goal. The goal is really, it's mostly around quality. And of course, you can do both. And most institutions and most MBAs around the world, they do both. I mean, the best MBA probably in France, the INSAD, which is located in Fontainebleau, or HEC, they have much larger group, like 150 or even more. But we're not making money out of students. We are not for-profit university. We're a public university that is heavily subsidized. We might have to change that in a few years, but so far we have the cooperative programs that we've developed in partnership with companies bring us quite a lot of money. So we're very financially sustainable. So there's no need to be scalable. And so basically, just to give you some numbers, we receive around 600 applications every year. Okay. And we select 25 students. So it's wonderful. It's, per year, in total 50 students. So we're always between like 5% to 10% admission rate, which, of course, sometimes we make mistakes in terms of casting. Sometimes, there's always 1 or 2 students who don't really fit in. But usually we have a pretty nice group of students, and because we are not in this, we are ranked the 12th. I think this is 12th rank in France. But I like to consider ourselves like a hidden champion. So the impact is quite limited. But the tuition fees, if we talk about that, are ridiculously low. The real cost of one student would be 15,000 euros or dollars per year, but what they pay is 243 euros. So this cost the real cost is paid totally by the French government. And this is also the case in Germany. This is also the case in Scandinavian. Now, we do have students who've been working for like 10 years and so on, and they have to pay 7,500, which is also very, very low. And they get, when I look at the curriculum design and what the things we offer, it's quite similar to what other programs do. The only thing is that we don't, have those big talk with former CEOs of large global companies, but we're trying to have this hands-on mentality and try to provide sustainable solutions or recommendations in order to address complex problems.
I'm so glad that you spoke about this because I had no idea that a global MBA would be possible at 500 US dollars. I thought it does not. It blows my mind. I'm reeling from what you've just told me. It does not make sense to me.
Okay, the cost is really 15,000, but the government
But the
pays it
government
all.
does subsidize, right? And that's very
totally.
interesting. So does it help in subsidizing living costs as well for internationals?
So that's also the challenge. I mean, if you're going to come to Paris, the cost of living is quite high. So students need to make a significant effort financially to be able to live here, at least for 1 year, because if they come during the first year, they can always do the second year in cooperative education. And in cooperative education, because they'll be working 3 to 4 days per week, they get paid. And they get paid. I mean, the salaries clearly, I mean, you know very well, United States, but the salaries in France are much lower, but you get probably more for what you get paid in terms of public services and quality of life. So in the second year they can be paid. Also, you have to understand that in France we have this tradition of social movements. And 20 years ago, the interns made a big social movement to get paid during their internship. And they get paid often like nowadays, almost the minimum wage. So it means the students also get paid the next 6 months. But again, every professors and even the tools that we give to our students, like we pay a subscription to Harvard Business Publishing to get access to some of their simulation, case studies, online courses, to make sure every students have the basic level, common level in terms of finance for MBAs, Excel spreadsheet for MBAs, management communication, all of those, we provide them for free for students. Our school pays for that. So that's, it's the idea of, public higher education in France, which is, but this is changing. The MBA in IAE Paris, the one Sorbonne, is, I think they're around 15,000 or 20,000, because they're more like an executive MBA. And in our MBA, we might have students that are 23, 24 years old. They all have at least 1 to 2 years of professional experience, but they're very, very junior. And a lot of them, they just come from this bachelor in electrical engineering or chemistry, or they're pharmacists. Some of them are lawyers, and they're trying to get those management skills in order to change a bit their career path or to work in the industry, but at the level of managing position.
Okay. So, Professor Eric, in your opinion, what are like some of the most significant trends that we are seeing that are shaping the landscape of business education in today's world?
Well, I'm not going to add much here because there's so much literature around that. The very first one, of course, is the technological gap or the digitalization. This is, I think, the very big trend, including artificial intelligence within teaching and within the learning experience of students. How can we integrate that and still get an edge and not being totally submissive to these new technologies, trying always to have a bit of a critical mindset, but also being able to use those tools. The other thing, I believe, 2015 Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, and this is very French, this consciousness that we need to have very strong environmental, social, and governance standards, the ESG standards, and this we include that within our research. So it's all about a societal impact, not only a social, but a societal impact, very comprehensive impact as an institution. So we need to get out of the classroom. We need to bring internationalization in the classroom, get out of the classroom. We can't just stay a closed system. I would say that's the second trend that we see a bit everywhere. And the third one, I think this is something that is a bit underestimated. In 2018, the OECD launched a new survey on global competencies. And in the world of disruption and division and polarization and conflict that we see everywhere, with a regain of nationalism, I think we are trying, and especially myself as a global educator, I think the third train is really to make sure managers have those global competencies to understand how local is affected by the global scale and how the local can impact the global scale. I think it's the whole set of skills in global competencies and critical thinking that is really important. But at the end of the day, we all live in on the same planet, and to me, this is a key, and this is why we call it the international MBA. It's not just an MBA. We try to have a teaching staff. The faculty is very, very diverse. We have people from Morocco, from Australia, from United States, England, Austria, Japan, China, India. We even have an Indian faculty. And among those faculties, people coming from the private sectors, managers themselves, scholars. So we have to try to have the same diversity in terms of the faculty than in terms of the students. So that's something very important. Yeah.
So you have obviously seen the world. You've taught at Berkeley. You've actually taught in Indonesia. You had a chance to see the world, and having spent building this specific international MBA program. What do you think are the key reasons that students are attracted to this program? What works, which others are not able to provide?
I think we're in Paris. We're in the Paris area, greater area, and being in Paris is not being in France only. It's being in Europe. It's being within the European Union, and this is a global city. So the students, what they get when they come to us is that they're going to work with, in the group of 25 students, we try not to have more than 3 or 4 students from the same nationality, to have as much diversity as we can. So they're going to work with students from, and we have, including some exchange students sometimes that join the program. So for example, in my Master 2, I have students from India, students from Indonesia, students from China, students from United States, students from Rwanda in Africa, students from France. We'll always have 1 or 2 from France, students from Italy, students from Mexico, from Brazil. So really every continent usually are represented within a group of students. We still get students from Russia, for example. We had also students from Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we had 2 students from Ukraine, 2 students from Russia that were working together. Of course, when the war started, it was a bit more tense in the group project. But we are trying to create a little united nation within our classroom. So that's, I would say, the main 3, I would say, added value of our MBA program. Again, it's the location. That's obvious. And the location also in Paris, you'll get all kind of global companies trying to invest in Europe. So Indian companies included. That's the first advantage. The second advantage, I would say, it's the creativity, the French mindset. We're never happy. We always complain. We're not very supportive sometimes. We criticize all the time, and that challenges the students a lot. It's very different than, if you study in the United States, and I lived myself for 4 years on the Stanford campus, and everything is amazing, everything is great, and the students are wonderful because they're customers. Of course, they pay. You're not going to criticize. Our students, they don't pay, so we really hammer them and we push them to their limits. And it's quite challenging sometimes, but this is good. And I think Indian students do very well in this kind of environment, because in India, they're also very challenged. And I think this something we share between India and France is this discontentment, these social mindsets. So that's, and the last thing I would say, the quality of life, the public services, public transportation, health, education, parks, the diversity you find in France makes it really a really nice place, a really nice, healthy, wealthy corner, like a very famous author used to say. Hans Rosling, I don't know if you heard about Gapminder and Hans Rosling, where he say everybody would like to live in the healthy, wealthy corner, and this is, you know, what we have to offer.
So it is very, you're right, you know, culturally, there is a lot of pushback which is not provided in a lot of Western schools, because I think they're afraid of pushing back even with students. And a big part of learning is, you know, challenging. You know, it's getting challenged as well. And you're right, a lot of schools now are very afraid of challenging, and also want to be very politically correct. And that maybe is even harming students. I mean, I've heard of some deans mention that students expect way too much from institutions and are willing to work way too less to achieve what they need to. So there is a set of entitled students getting into this, you know, system,
and we don't want those students. We do not want those students. I mean, they have perfect institute. It's a matter of fit, right? Fit. We want students with a hands-on mentality, students that are, you know, able to be challenged. Sometimes actually with the Indian students, I have to tell them, please let the other talk, because they're quite very extroverted and very engaged and very, you know, they want to get it done. And sometimes, you know, when you have South Korean students in the classroom and you have, you know, I say, please slow down, give a bit of space to the others, and on and on. And so, and this can be quite challenging to some of the students, of course. Yeah.
So, do international students encounter challenges in the French job market, you know, after they graduate?
Yeah, they do, obviously. They do already when they arrive at school, because we are an international MBA. We're a very nice little global cluster, but at the same time, we're part of the French public university. So the information system, for example, is not in English. So some of the things are translated, of course, but not everything. So they have to navigate in environments where you need to learn some French. And this is what we also provide every Thursday afternoon. This is one also added value of a program, is that we decided to offer language courses. So they have a French for Foreigner intensive language courses. That's for free. And they also can take Spanish or German if they're already fluent in French. So students during the 2 years, they need to get those language skills, these additional language skills. Now, once they apply for an internship or for a job, you know, I know people living in France or living in Paris who don't speak any French, and they've been living here for 20 years. And they stay in this global expat community in the west side of Paris, and they don't really care. And you can find restaurants and very nice places in different communities. I mean, clearly, where we're located in Paris, we're located in the greater Paris area on the southeast, and there's a very strong minority of people from Tamil Nadu. And of course, some of them, they would even speak Tamil among, you know, and so you can, that's what the West can offer you, you know, you have those communities. But we do have a very large corporation where they can work in English. But I would say, of course, the biggest barrier would be the language barrier. If you really want to make a difference in a country, you have to speak a local language. And this is what I tell to my students when we have a partnership with the University of Pondicherry, and I want them to speak and to learn some Tamil. You need to learn the local language. And I think one of the problem of most MBAs around the world is that you stay in that little globish bubble, and once you on the spot, on the job, dealing with the local people, you face a few differences, a few misunderstandings, and language skills could help. So I think this is something that was really underestimated a lot during the last 30 years of globalization. And even if I really love her, I love Tsedal Neely, this researcher from Harvard Business School, who introduced the need for language policy, and she advocates a lot for English. And I can understand that from the point of view of India, where you have so many like different languages, so you need to have some kind of a common tongue, common language. But this should not be at the cost of forgetting the need for the local language. So I would say the big issue is this. And another issue in many countries is the work permit, the visa. The good thing in European Union, we have the visa Schengen, the Schengen visa that gives you opportunity to work everywhere around the Schengen area. So we do have students after the MBA, they move to Belgium or they move to Germany or without any difficulty. The visa, it's hard. And of course, one of the major risk factor for us would be a change of policy, a migration policy, and we'll see what happened in the next elections. But there's so much need for talents, and we have a very aging population that it's quite positive for you students.
Okay, fantastic. So, having been a global educator, what are some of the emerging trends or sought after profiles by companies for MBA students? Companies come to you and say, I want these kind of students. They would make us really happy. And how do you see that working out globally?
Yeah, well, as companies sometimes they have a few contradictions. On one hand, they want the experts. On the other hand, they want people that are able to work on different projects and have interdisciplinary skills, and so and we face the same thing on and on and on. When I look at the past, the last 10 years, and what have our students become. Some are now in HR, some others are digital marketers, some are project managers, all kind of industries, all kind of positions. I think there's a lot of flexibility. Every organizations now, even the largest organizations are very agile, and they embarked into those agile processes. So for example, I can give you an example. We had a student who was a political refugee from Bosnia who studied law in Norway. So he had a Norwegian passport. He came to us and he went into logistics and international purchasing in the specialization in the second year. And but he was a lawyer, and now he works in entrepreneurship and business development for AXA, one of the largest insurance company in the world. So I feel this is what our MBA. When I ask students, we have students now who live in the US and they work for German companies or American companies. The ability to solve complex problem in the global team. I think this is one of the major skills that companies look for. The problem, of course, in the job description is that often they look for experts or they look for people with a certain set of skills. We emphasize a lot on data. Students need to be also data driven. Like in every MBAs, and this is, I think, one of the main added value of MBAs. It's a very comprehensive programs where you get exposed to legal challenges. So you have international contract law classes, international negotiation. Yeah, so I feel this, it's really like the cherry on the cake. Usually students come to us already as experts, economists, lawyers, pharmacists, biologists, engineers, architects. And so what they get with us is this little, it's not a little, but these like very fundamental management skills and this ability, again, to work in global teams and try to provide all the time this idea of a sustainable recommendations. It's not only, shouldn't be only financial driven or short-term driven, and it's also including the challenges of the change management, resistance, impact. This is very important.
think that's a very nuanced answer. I really like the answer. So, I recently, I think President Macron came to India. He spoke about getting 30,000 students, Indian students, into France by 2030. And I'm assuming this is a very ambitious goal. And I'm very curious about how you think some of the things that French institutions or the country needs to do to be able to attract so many students on a regular basis. So, any ideas on what strategies or initiatives have to be done to lead to this number?
Okay, a little bit of context here. France is clearly behind Germany. Germany already has 30,000, more than 30,000 students, Indian students studying in Germany. So I was in 2018 in India for the first and only time I've ever been to India to establish partnership with IIT Madras, Chennai, the Indian Institute of Technology in Chennai, and also the University of Pondicherry. So I mainly focus on Tamil Nadu because of the community of Tamil Nadu that we have in our location. So, and at that time, I think we had less than 10,000 and people, I went to New Delhi and talked to people from Campus France, from the French embassy, and they told us actually that 20 years ago, there was less than 100 students learning, in France. So we come from very far. I believe, I think now we're around 20,000. A little bit more than 20,000 Indian students, and we're trying to reach those 30,000. I don't think the goals is the objective is too high. It's trying to align ourselves on Germany, and Germany benefits a lot from those Indian students because I have a few counterparts in Germany who are in charge of MBA programs. Half of the groups are actually coming from India. And those Indians, often Indian engineers who are doing those MBAs, helped a lot German companies to digitalize themselves. So we're a bit behind on the process of digitalization, especially for small and medium companies. Large companies, they have no problem, but small and medium companies have a very strong need of the IT skills and the problem-solving skills and the data skills of Indian students. France is just trying to catch up with Germany. That's one thing. And what they put in the balance, it's a large number of scholarships. So we have had, for example, in a program, 2 students from the CHAPAC, laureate of the CHAPAC scholarship, which is a very prestigious scholarship that's quite consistent. And this scholarship helps mostly to face the living cost of France. We are also establishing more and more partnership with Indian institutions, private, sometimes for-profit institutions also, and also you need to probably, something most people don't know is that the education in management, business and management in France, the private education went from 60,000 students to almost 280,000 students in the last 15 years. So there's a very strong development of management program and business programs in private institutions. And for them, of course, the biggest challenge is the scalability. They need as many students as they can. So traditionally in France, in the private, so we have the public universities and then we have the private business schools. Those private business schools were always related to the Chamber of Commerce. And actually, you might not know, but the oldest private business schools in the world, it comes from the Chamber of Commerce of Paris, which is École Supérieure de Commerce de Paris, established in the 19th century. And this, but aside of those traditional business school linked to the Chamber of Commerce, we have seen a lot of investment funds investing in small schools and establishing big brands and being new private business school, Excellior, and we have Galileo, different hedge funds. and they invest a lot of France because of the location, because of the European Union markets, because of the quality of life. So we've seen a lot of like institution popping out, and they use the network of the French embassies and Campus France, and they go to those student fairs to recruit as many students as they can. So I'm quite confident that we will meet these targets. And I would even argue that we don't need 30,000, we need 50,000 or even more. But we'll see what our political leaders will say. We'll have to wait the next elections.
Okay, got that. What does an ideal candidate profile look like for somebody who wants to study at your institution in your international MBA program?
Yeah, so we need so for example, in the second year this year, I have 4 Indian students. All of them had some professional experience. 2 had an engineering background, but 1 had a background in language, and she was fluent in French, and she was teaching French in high school. We have 3 women, 1 man. There's something that we have to acknowledge. There's more women in India studying engineering than in France. In France, there's only 25% of women in engineering schools. I think in India is around 43%. And so clearly this kind of profile of women with a background in engineering that really want to make a difference in their life was really good. But I can also remember a former student, a man. He was part of the national rugby team of India. I didn't know there was a rugby team in India, but there is one. A personal trainer, engineering background, supported by Calcutta French consulate. And we were very happy to have him in our group. So I wouldn't say there is like one, obviously, if you look at when I'm currently reviewing the 600 applications, and obviously if you have someone that is well-traveled, that has excellent grades, that is coming from a prestigious, well-ranked institution, of course, you check all the boxes. But sometimes we like to have profiles that are a bit out of the box. Because I can see the difference also. I mean, I have more than almost 30 years now of experience in higher education, because I start quite as a young age. And for example, I have this student. She did one of the best Indian school of design in fashion design. And she wanted to make a change in her life, and she invested, and she wanted to come to France and work in this industry, but with management skills. And I like this kind of profile. It's like the profile that usually that are not very welcome is those students that already have an MBA, for example. We do have a lot of Indian applicants that already have a master or an MBA or management skills. And we just consider that they're not going to get the added value of an MBA is not going to be good enough, because they already have those skills, and they're not going to make a difference in the classroom. So, it's always the same thing. Everybody is looking for the next talent, and it's usually on the fringe you get them. But it's also nice. We have right now students who did University of New Delhi, and he did economics, and he's doing very well. So yeah.
So do you consider yourself a talent scout? Like you're looking for this unique set of people to build a team together?
Yeah, I think it's like every HR position now, it's like talent manager, or everything is about the talent. I'm French. Some people are not always talented, and they can look as quite mediocre. And some people that are the most gifted sometimes are not very nice human beings in a classroom. So But yeah. I'd like to get as many talents as I could for MBA. But what I like the most in my job, in my line of job, is to see how is to help them flourish and discover their own talents. And this is also something that I can see in the MBA program, is how in a span of 1 year or 2 years, how suddenly those students, and especially young women will come from a middle of nowhere in another country, and then they arrive in Paris, they'll be lost in translation, and suddenly after 1 or 2 years they have a very good position. I'm thinking about one Indian student particularly, who's working for Le Safre. Le Safre is the largest company in the East, you know, if you want to do the bread, and they're everywhere in Africa and so on. It's a family-owned company that exists for many, many years. And she has one of the biggest position in this company, and she's making a difference. But when she arrived, you know, didn't know anything about the environment and so on. And this is the kind of profile I like to see. Obviously, we are not a world-class MBA program, so we're not raising the next generation of top leaders. We, as I told you, I think we didn't champion. We're trying to do the best we can to help those young talents from all around the world to express their talents and to express themselves. I've had also 2 other students from India who came back to India and work for the British government, one of them, after the first year. The other one worked for QS, you know, one of your competitors. I don't know if they're your competitors. QS Impact, and you know, they quite, I think that's also one of the added value of MBA. It's quite transferable. You know, when they come back to their home country, we have had American students also came back to their home country, and they did very well. But they usually have I mean, it's the MBA is too young now. I mean, only 10 years old. So it's mostly middle managers or top middle managers, but not, you know, we're not, you know, I wish I could say that, but we are not educating the next generation of the global CEOs of the next generation of global companies. Some also create their own companies in France. We have had that.
That is impressive. But that is impressive even for a small batch. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, your total alumni strength might be under 250. So I think there was some way to go.
Yeah. But it's also the idea that you know, we have to do it. I mean, with such a small group, if we don't make a difference in their life, is that we're not doing a job. And this is also what we can offer. We you know, I always have like a WhatsApp channel with the student representative and with the alumni, and there's again, it's all about the hands-on mentality, impact, engagement, and which we like to say that we are as much engaged as our students are in different projects. Yeah.
So is there a way, any advice for international students? You know, you're saying you're getting 600 applications. What is a good way for them to stand out in your eyes? You know, if they have to apply, what is 1 or 2 advice that you would give them?
You know, I believe it's the same thing then when they apply for a job on LinkedIn or whatever. You have to use any communication channel as you can. You can't just send like a message in a bottle in the sea and hoping that people will accept you. So they'll have to contact me. They'll have to, you know, they have, I think, to personalize a bit the application, to stand out, to show how motivated they are by asking questions and not assuming that they read and they know it all because they look at the website. A website is currently going to change. There's a small videos where I present in French with the subtitle in English, the International MBA. But what really makes a difference is when it's always the same, huh? When you do the extra mile, when you make an effort to contact directly the program director or the assistant, or try to contact former students and then be recommended by former students. We get a lot of students from mouth to ear. Former students say, hey, you should do this and do this. It's a low cost option that is actually a game changer. That's going to be a game changer in your life. Yeah.
Fantastic. That brings me to the last question. So in less than 10 words, can you tell a student why they should choose your business school?
A true global MBA in a global environment.
Right. I think that is a fantastic
and we're also very Indian friendly.
That is a fantastic answer. So we have 3 minutes. So I'll have one more question for you, which is, what do you consider a hidden gem in your institution that people don't know about, but very few people know about it, but it's very powerful?
I would say it's the critical approach of management. We have the second largest research center in the Paris area in management, and we have most of our scholars, and some are very international. They're trying to revise a bit the mainstream theories of management, and they do that together with companies who face a lot of different challenges around resistance. So I would argue this is the hidden gem of my institution is really this critical approach of management in a traditional French legacy of Michel Foucault. And for example, when I teach organization theory, I always dig in the past theories of the utopian theories of the 18th, 19th centuries and different organizations around the world. We're not here just to do a mainstream storytelling around successful companies around the world. So there's always this very deep, trying to have a deep understanding of management and using different fields from anthropology, philosophy, sociology, but also economy. So I would say that's the hidden gem of our institution.
And that's a fantastic answer. And I want to thank you for being so candid, for being so honest. It was very refreshing to talk to you. And I really loved learning about your institution. It seems like a very well hidden gem. And I really want more and more people to apply to your institution, because I think 600 does not do it justice. And I really hope that we are able to help get more quality students your way, so that they can maybe live their dreams.
One final word is that my institution is part of a network of public university school of management that were created on the model of the Indian Institute of Management. It's really the IIM, the IAE in France, Institut d'Administration. They were created in the 1950s, the first one in Paris, and now we have 38 IAE in France, in most cities. And so if Indian students, some applicants don't want to bear the cost of living in Paris, which is quite expensive, they can always apply to some of the others school. And for example, in Bordeaux, in the city of wine, there is also an international MBA at a very low cost. So we have 38 institutions spread all around France in every city. So I would actually recommend students who come from the very first time and they never travel out of India to maybe go to a smaller city to the first year with my colleagues and then join us in the second year. We work we work together. It's called the IAE France, IAE France, and there's a website that represents all our study programs. And this is the only way we can compete with those beautiful private business schools that we also have in France. We deliver so much in terms of education in management and business.
All right. Thank you so very much for your time, Professor Eric. You've been supremely insightful, and have a fabulous day ahead. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Alvin. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. See you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Goodbye.